Emma Brooks stepped off the transport ship and looked around. The space station was huge. Aliens walked everywhere. Some had 2 legs like her. Others had 4 legs or no legs at all. Some floated in the air. Emma had never seen so many different creatures in one place. She was nervous. Emma was the first human at the Galactic Defense Academy in 10 years. Earth had fought hard to get this chance. Now Emma had to prove that humans belonged here. She was 27 years old and had been a soldier for 6 years. But here, surrounded by aliens who had been fighting wars for thousands of years, she felt small. A screen appeared in front of her face. It showed a map of the station. A green light marked where her room was. Emma walked through the long hallways. Other students stared at her. Some whispered in languages her translator could barely understand. Emma kept walking. She tried to look confident even though her heart was beating fast. Her room was small but nice. It had a bed made for humans and a desk with a computer. Emma put her bags down and sat on the bed. She pulled out her schedule. Tomorrow morning she would start combat training. Her teacher would be Instructor Kaleseth, a famous warrior from the Vraxian Empire. Emma had read everything about the Vraxians. They were tall aliens with 4 arms and black skin that looked like glass. They had been fighting for 10,000 years. Their fighting style was taught all over the galaxy. Kaleseth had never lost a fight in 300 years. Emma felt her stomach tighten. 300 years. He had been alive longer than her entire country. That night, Emma could not sleep. She went to the training room and practiced with her sword. The weapon felt good in her hands. She had trained with it for years. She knew every move, every technique. She had learned sword fighting from many teachers on Earth. She was ready. At least, she hoped she was ready. The next morning came too fast. Emma arrived at the combat arena 15 minutes early. The room was massive. In the center was a big platform for fighting. Around it were seats for people to watch. The floor looked like stone, but Emma knew it could change into anything. Other students began to arrive. Emma counted 20 different types of aliens. She recognized some from her studies. There were bug-like creatures with hard shells. There were snake-like aliens that moved without legs. There were crystal aliens that glowed with light. All of them looked dangerous. A door opened. Instructor Kaleseth walked in. He was even bigger than Emma expected. He stood 8 feet tall. His forearms hung at his sides. 4 swords hung from his belt, 1 for each hand. His black skin caught the light and sparkled. His large dark eyes seemed to see everything at once. He wore simple gray armor with strange marks on it. Emma's translator said the marks were combat medals. There were many of them. Kaleseth walked to the center platform. He did not speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was soft, but everyone could hear it clearly. The translator made his words sound more powerful somehow. He said that combat was not about being strong or fast. Those things helped, but they were not the most important. Combat was about control. You must control yourself. You must control your weapon. You must control the space around you, and you must control your enemy. This was the secret to winning. Emma listened carefully. Her hand rested on her practice sword. She had heard similar ideas before, but something about the way Kaleseth explained it was different. He talked about fighting like it was art or music. He made it sound beautiful. Kaleseth said he would show them what he meant. He asked for volunteers to fight him. Many hands went up. The first volunteer was huge. It was one of the bug creatures, twice as big as Emma. It had thick armor that looked like it could stop bullets. The fight lasted 12 seconds. Kaleseth barely moved. His sword flowed like water. The bug creature never hit him once. Kaleseth's blade touched the bug's throat and stopped. In a real fight, the bug would be dead. The fight was over. The second volunteer did not do better. Neither did the third. Each time, Kaleseth showed perfect control. He explained each move after it happened. He showed how he had forced his opponents into bad positions. He showed how he always knew what they would do next. Then Kaleseth looked at Emma. He said her name and waved for her to come to the platform. Emma felt everyone's eyes turn to her. She took a deep breath. She had been trained to stay calm. She walked to the platform and pulled out her practice sword. Kaleseth stood in the center. One of his 4 hands rested on his sword. The other 3 hands hung loose. He was not even holding a weapon yet. He did not think Emma was worth taking seriously. Emma bowed slightly, showing respect. Kaleseth nodded his head. He told Emma to attack when she was ready. He said that in real combat, the person who waits too long dies. The warrior who acts first controls the fight from the beginning. Emma did not wait. She moved forward fast. Her sword came up in a cutting motion toward his chest. It was a fake attack. She planned to change direction at the last second, but Kaleseth did not defend. He did not even move much. Her sword passed through empty air. Before Emma could react, she felt pressure on her wrist. One of his hands had caught her sword arm. His fingers pressed on specific spots. Emma tried to pull away, but her arm would not move right. It was not that he held her tight. It was that he pressed the exact spots that stopped her from moving. Kaleseth talked to the class. He explained what he was doing. He said Emma's attack was good but easy to predict. She had shown her plan through small movements in how she stood. He had simply moved to where the attack would not be. Then he used pressure points to stop her from using her weapon. He let her go. Emma stepped back. Her mind was racing. She had never fought anyone like this. She changed her plan. She came in lower this time. She attacked 3 times quickly from different angles. She tried to be too fast for him to predict. Kaleseth barely moved. None of her attacks hit him. It was like trying to hit smoke. Every time her sword should have connected, he was somewhere else. Then his hand was on her shoulder, pushing gently. Emma stumbled backward. She almost fell but caught herself. Her face felt hot. She was embarrassed. The watching students were silent. Emma had trained her whole adult life. She had won tournaments. She had survived real battles. And this alien was playing with her like she was a beginner. Kaleseth kept talking. He used Emma's attacks as examples. He said humans showed interesting potential. They were aggressive and adaptable. They did not give up easily. However, they relied too much on strength and speed. They did not use enough precision and timing. Something inside Emma broke. She was tired of being a teaching example. She was tired of being treated like a primitive. She had earned her place here. She had proven herself against Earth's best warriors. She would not be dismissed so easily. Emma attacked again. This time she did not try to be clever. She did not try fancy techniques. She went back to basics. Sometimes the best plan is simple aggression. She came at Kaleseth, hard and fast. Her sword moved in continuous strikes. She did not fake. She did not set traps. She just attacked over and over. She gave him no time to talk. She gave him no space to explain. She used every bit of strength and speed she had. Her muscles burned, but she did not stop. For the first time, Kaleseth had to actually defend. His hand moved to his sword. He drew it smoothly. The blade came up to block Emma's strike. She felt the impact travel up her arms. His sword was heavier than it looked. The force almost knocked her weapon from her hands. But Emma did not stop. She adjusted her grip and attacked from a different angle. Kaleseth blocked again. The sound of their swords meeting echoed through the arena. Once, twice, 3 times their blades met. Emma felt her muscles screaming, but she pushed through the pain. Then Kaleseth did something unexpected. Instead of just blocking her next strike, he met it with full force. The impact was enormous. Emma felt her practice sword crack. Before she could adjust, Kaleseth struck again in the same spot. Her weapon broke in half. Emma stood there breathing hard. She held the broken handle of her sword. The watching students made sounds of surprise. Kaleseth lowered his sword and looked at her with what might have been curiosity. He said that was interesting. He said human. Weapons were not designed for hard, continuous impacts. They favored lighter, faster blades that could not survive the kind of force he had just used. It was a problem that needed fixing if humans wanted to compete in galactic combat. Emma looked at her broken sword. Then she looked at Kaleseth. Something about his words made her realize something. He was treating this as a technical problem, a problem with equipment. But that was not what had just happened. She had forced him to actually fight her, to meet her strength with his strength. For a few seconds, she had taken control away from him. He had won by breaking her weapon, but he had won by abandoning his own principle. He had stopped showing control and started using overwhelming force. Emma held up the broken blade. She spoke clearly so everyone could hear. She said that she thought he told them combat was about control. Breaking her sword seemed more like the opposite. The arena went completely silent. Several students made shocked sounds. No one talked back to Instructor Kaleseth like that. Kaleseth tilted his head and studied Emma with new interest. His dark eyes seemed to look through her. Then he laughed. It was a soft musical sound that seemed strange from such a buy. After the other students left, Kaleseth walked closer to Emma. His 4 hands were folded in a way that meant he wanted to talk seriously. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. It was meant only for her. He said she was correct. He had abandoned control in favor of force. It was the first time in many years a student had made him do that. He asked if she knew why she had succeeded when the others failed. Emma thought about it. She looked at her broken sword. Then she looked back at Kaleseth and answered honestly. She said she stopped trying to fight the way he expected. She started fighting the way she actually fights. Humans do not think of combat as a dance or art. For humans, combat is survival. It is messy and brutal and desperate. Sometimes the only control that matters is refusing to give up. Kaleseth was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Emma was learning this meant approval. He said tomorrow they would begin real training. He would teach her the Vraxian way of combat. She would need that philosophy to survive in the galaxy, but perhaps, he added, she could teach him something about the human way. He thought the galaxy could learn much from a species that views every fight as survival. Emma smiled despite the pain in her arms and her embarrassment. She bowed again, deeper this time. Kaleseth returned the gesture with all 4 of his hands pressed together. As Emma left the arena, she felt that something important had just begun. The weeks that followed were hard. Every morning at dawn, Emma went to the combat arena. Kaleseth put her through exercises that pushed her to her limits. The Vraxian instructor was tough but never cruel. He always explained why each drill mattered. He explained each stance and each breathing pattern. Emma learned that Vraxian combat was built on patience and observation. Human martial arts often emphasized aggression and quick decisions. The Vraxian way taught her to wait for the perfect moment. She learned to see openings in an opponent's defense before they even knew those openings existed. Kaleseth explained that his people learned these principles to survive. The Vraxian homeworld was dangerous. Predators hunted with perfect camouflage and very fast strikes. Early Vraxians survived not by being the strongest or fastest. They survived by being the most aware and the most controlled. Over thousands of years, those survival skills became an art. Now it was considered one of the best fighting styles in the galaxy. But Emma noticed something Kaleseth never said directly. The Vraxian combat style was designed for duels, for one-on-one fights where honor and tradition mattered. It was beautiful and effective. But it had rules and expectations and patterns. Human combat training was different. Earth had spent most of its history at war with itself. Those wars taught humanity hard lessons. There were no perfect duels on a battlefield. There was chaos, confusion, and fear. There was the desperate need to survive by any means necessary. Human fighting styles reflected that reality. They mixed techniques from many cultures. They adapted and changed with every new war. One morning after a hard training session, Kaleseth sat with Emma on the edge of the platform. It was unusual for him to take breaks. It was even more unusual for him to sit. His forearms were in a meditation pose. 2 arms folded across his chest, 2 arms resting on his knees. He told Emma she was learning faster than any student he had trained in decades. But something was holding her back. She was learning the movements perfectly. She was mastering the techniques. But she was not truly accepting the philosophy behind them. He asked her to tell him what she was thinking when she fought. Emma drank some water and thought carefully. She had been thinking about this question herself. She was trying to understand why she felt disconnected from what she was learning. She said that when she fights, she thinks about survival. She thinks about protecting the people beside her. She thinks about completing the mission. Human combat is not just about defeating an opponent. It is about achieving an objective, usually under terrible conditions with incomplete information and not enough resources. She continued. She said the Vraxian way is elegant and effective, but it assumes certain things about combat. It assumes there will be time to observe. It assumes there will be space to move. It assumes an opponent who follows at least some basic rules. But in her experience, real combat was rarely like that. It was fast and brutal. It often came down to who could adapt faster when everything went wrong. Kalseth listened without interrupting. His dark eyes stayed fixed on her face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he asked her to tell him about a specific battle. The battle that had earned her the medal that got her into the academy. Emma rarely talked about that mission, but she found herself describing it now. It had been a rescue operation on a hostile moon. Her squad was supposed to extract scientists from a research station under attack. The plan called for a quick in-and-out operation, but everything went wrong from the start. Their transport was hit during approach. They were forced to land 3 kilometers from the target. Half her squad was injured in the crash. They made it to the research station, but the attackers had already broken in. What should have been simple extraction became a running firefight through maze-like corridors. They had civilians with them and ammunition was running low. Emma ended up separated from her squad. She was defending a group of scientists in a laboratory. Attackers tried to break through the reinforced door. She held that position for 40 minutes with a damaged rifle and a knife. She used everything she could find as improvised weapons or defenses. She survived by being creative, ruthless, and absolutely refusing to give up. When backup finally arrived, Emma had been wounded in 3 places. The laboratory was a wreck, but all the scientists had survived. The report called her actions heroic. Emma just called it necessary. After she finished her story, Kalseth sat in silence for several minutes. Emma could see him thinking about what she had told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. It lacked some of the formal authority it usually carried. He admitted that the Vraxians had not fought a major war in over 2,000 years. They had conflicts, certainly. Battles along their borders. Political disputes that sometimes turned violent. But nothing on the scale of what humanity experienced in just the last few centuries. The last time his people fought for survival as a species was so long ago, it had become mythology rather than history. He said that perhaps that was why Vraxian combat had become so refined and structured. They had the luxury of treating it as art, because they no longer needed it as a survival tool. But humanity, stepping onto the galactic stage for the first time, still carried that desperate edge, that willingness to do whatever it took to survive. Kalseth stood. He extended one of his hands to help Emma to her feet. He told her he had been teaching her the Vraxian way because it was what he knew. It was what had been passed down through countless generations. But maybe what she really needed was to learn how to merge the 2 philosophies, to combine Vraxian precision with human adaptability. He said from this point forward, their training would be different. He would continue teaching her Vraxian techniques, but he wanted her to show him how a human would adapt those techniques for real combat, for the messy, chaotic situations she had described. The next phase of training began that afternoon. Instead of controlled exercises and formal drills, Kalseth introduced scenario-based training. The combat arena's floor could simulate any environment. He used this to create increasingly complex situations. The first scenario was simple. A narrow corridor with poor visibility and multiple enemies. Emma had to advance through the space while dealing with targets that appeared without warning. It was chaotic and stressful. Exactly the kind of situation she had trained for on Earth. She moved through the simulation using a combination of what Kalseth taught her and her own instincts. The Vraxian techniques helped her maintain awareness of her surroundings. She could sense attacks before they came, but when things got desperate, when 3 holographic opponents attacked at once from different angles, she abandoned the graceful forms. She simply fought dirty. She used walls for leverage. She threw objects at opponents. She did not waste time on elegant finishing moves when a quick strike would work. Kalseth watched the entire exercise with intense focus. When Emma came out of the simulation, breathing hard but victorious, he was already analyzing every move. But instead of criticizing her abandonment of proper form, he seemed fascinated. He said she had identified the moment when control became impossible. She adapted instantly. She maintained enough awareness to avoid being overwhelmed. But she did not hesitate to use unorthodox tactics when the situation demanded it. It was something he had never thought to teach because it went against the fundamental principles of his training. Emma pointed out that in real combat, there is no such thing as unorthodox, only effective or ineffective. Humans learned early in their history that survival does not care about honor or tradition. The warrior who sticks to the rules against an opponent who does not is just going to die with good form. Kaleseth seemed to think about this for a long moment. Then he asked her to design a training scenario for him. To create a situation where his Vraxian techniques would be at a disadvantage, he wanted to understand what she meant. To experience it firsthand rather than just. 3 months passed. Emma and Kaleseth continued developing their new combat system. News of their training methods spread beyond the academy. Military observers from across the galaxy came to watch. The Galactic Defense Council sent representatives to several training sessions. The Academy's annual combat tournament was coming soon. It was a big event where students from across the galaxy competed. Winners gained recognition and often got jobs in elite military units immediately. Emma planned to enter. She saw it as another chance to prove humanity's worth. But 2 weeks before the tournament, Kaleseth called her to his private office. Emma had never been inside before. The room was surprisingly simple. It had basic furniture and walls covered in old weapons from various cultures. Emma recognized several as human designs from different time periods in history. Kaleseth sat with his forearms in a formal posture. Emma had learned this meant serious conversation. He explained that the tournament organizers made an unusual request. They wanted to create a special exhibition match separate from the regular tournament. It would showcase the new combat philosophy they had been developing. The match would put Emma against the current tournament champion. His name was Dexthor from the Kresh Collective. Dexthor was legendary at the Academy. He was a massive bug-like fighter with reflexes so fast they seemed impossible. His shell was nearly impenetrable. His 4 limbs could each use a weapon independently with perfect coordination. He had won the tournament for the past 3 years and had never lost a match. Emma felt nervous. She had watched videos of Dexthor's previous matches. They were brutal displays of speed and power. Most of his matches ended within minutes. Fighting him would be the ultimate test of everything she learned. Kaleseth explained she had the right to refuse. This was not part of standard training. Losing to Dexthor would not affect her grades. But if she accepted, she would be representing their entire philosophy of adaptive combat. Emma did not need to think. She said yes immediately. This was exactly the kind of challenge she came to the academy to face. The next 2 weeks were the hardest training of Emma's life. Kaleseth put her through exercises designed specifically to prepare for Dexthor's fighting style. They studied hours of footage, analyzing every move the Kresh warrior made. Dexthor was fast, but his speed followed predictable patterns based on his body structure. His shell was strong, but Kaleseth identified several weak points where the plates met and flexibility was required. Most importantly, they noticed that Dexthor fought with absolute confidence. He never expected opponents to pose a real threat. That confidence, Kaleseth suggested, could be his weakness. If Emma could break his rhythm and force him to fight defensively even for a moment, it might create openings. The day of the tournament arrived. The main arena had been transformed into a massive space with seating for thousands. Holographic displays floated above the fighting platform showing replays and statistics. The regular tournament was scheduled throughout the day, but the exhibition match between Emma and Dexthor was the featured event. It was scheduled for evening when the largest crowd would be present. Emma spent the day watching other matches. She studied how different species approached combat. She saw graceful displays of traditional fighting. She saw brutal exchanges of raw power. She saw tactical exercises that looked more like chess than fights. Each match offered something to learn. She also noticed the attention she received. Students and instructors kept glancing at her and whispering to companions. The human who broke her blade on the first day was now the center of academy gossip. She was about to face an opponent many considered unbeatable. As evening came, Emma went to a meditation room. She went through breathing exercises and mental preparation. She pictured herself in the arena facing Dexthor. She implemented the strategies she and Kaleseth developed. She acknowledged her fear and transformed it into focus. Kaleseth found her an hour before the match. He sat beside her in silence for several minutes. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet and steady. He told her that regardless of the outcome, she had already accomplished something remarkable. She had challenged assumptions that stood unchallenged for thousands of years. She had shown there were still new ideas to discover, but, he added with what Emma recognized as his version of a smile, it would be particularly satisfying to prove those ideas by defeating Dexthor in front of the entire academy. Emma laughed and the tension broke. Kaleseth was right. She was already successful just by being here. Winning would be wonderful, but even losing would prove humanity could compete at this level. The arena was packed when Emma entered. The noise from thousands of spectators created a roar. Holographic displays showed her image with statistics and background information. She saw mentions of her broken blade incident, her training with Kaleseth, and her military record on Earth. On the opposite side, Dexthor made his entrance. The Kresh warrior was even more impressive in person. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, his shell gleamed under arena lights. Each of his forearms held a weapon. Traditional Kresh fighting blades curved like farming tools. His compound eyes seemed to track multiple things at once. His mandibles clicked in what Emma's translator said was anticipation. They approached the center from opposite sides. A referee explained the rules. This was a regulated match with safety protocols, but the weapons were real. Serious injury was possible. Medical teams were on standby. The match would continue until one fighter yielded, was incapacitated, or the referee stopped it. Emma drew her weapon. It was a new blade made specifically for this match. It was heavier than her practice blade. Human-made but incorporating elements of Vraxian design. The balance was perfect. She had spent hours with this weapon, making it an extension of her body. Dexthor regarded her with his bug-like stare. His mandibles clicked with amusement. Through her translator, she heard his voice. It was sharp and buzzing. He said he had heard much about her. Humans were known for persistence. It was admirable, but it would not save her. The Kresh had been warriors for 50,000 years. No soft-skinned species had ever defeated him. Emma met his gaze steadily. She replied that she learned from studying his matches that he never fought a human before. There was a first time for everything. The referee signaled the start. The arena fell silent. Dexthor attacked immediately. His 4 blades moved in a coordinated pattern that would overwhelm most opponents in seconds. Emma had seen this opening in his previous fights. This aggressive start was designed to intimidate and end matches quickly. She did not try to match his aggression. Instead, she moved backward. She used her smaller size to slip between his attacks while maintaining perfect awareness of spacing. It was pure Vraxian technique. The philosophy of control that Kaleseth drilled into her. Do not fight the attack. Flow around it. Let the opponent overcommit, then exploit the opening. Dexthor's initial assault found only empty air. Emma saw the slight change in his posture. The momentary surprise at facing an opponent who did not immediately crumble. She used that moment to study his movement patterns and confirm the weaknesses she and Kaleseth identified. The Kresh warrior adjusted his approach, becoming more methodical. He began working the angles, using his reach advantage to keep Emma at distance. His 4 weapons created a web of steel nearly impossible to penetrate. Emma defended. Her blade moved in precise arcs to deflect and redirect his strikes. The crowd watched in unusual silence. They expected a quick victory for Dexthor, but Emma was holding her ground. Minutes passed. The pace remained intense. Emma's arms began to ache from continuous impacts, but she maintained her defense, waiting for the right moment. Then Dexthor made a mistake. It was tiny, barely noticeable, but Emma's enhanced awareness caught it. He had fallen into a rhythm. His 4-blade pattern repeated with slight variations. He was confident, perhaps too confident. He assumed Emma would eventually tire and make a fatal error. Emma decided it was time to change tactics. She stopped defending and suddenly attacked. Not with elegant Vraxian technique, but with aggressive human directness. She closed the distance faster than Dexthor expected. She got inside his reach where his long blades were less effective. She aimed for weak points in his shell, the joints where flexibility required thinner armor. Dexthor stumbled back, clearly surprised by the sudden shift in strategy. For the first time in the match, he was defending instead of attacking. Emma pressed her advantage. She mixed Vraxian precision with human aggression in ways Dexthor had never encountered. But the Kresh warrior was championed for good reason. He adapted quickly, using his superior strength to create distance, One of his blades caught Emma's shoulder, a glancing blow that would have been fatal in real battle but only scored a point in this match. Emma felt blood running down her arm, but she ignored it. The fight became a brutal exchange. Dexthor had been forced to take her seriously, to fight defensively at times, something his previous opponents never accomplished. Emma was bleeding from multiple cuts, but she had landed several strikes against impossible odds. The crowd was roaring now. This was a real match, not the one-sided demonstration everyone expected. Emma knew she could not win through long fighting. Dexthor's natural armor gave him huge advantage in prolonged matches. The weeks following Emma's victory over Dexthor brought many changes. More students wanted to learn the new combat techniques. Enrollment in Kael'Zeth's training sessions tripled. Students from every species wanted to learn adaptive fighting. The combat arena became the most popular place on the station. Waiting lists for observation slots extended months into the future. Emma found herself in a new role. She was no longer just a student proving herself. She was an instructor responsible for teaching the next generation of galactic warriors. The transition was challenging. She relied heavily on Kael'Zeth's guidance as they developed their curriculum. They created a program that started with traditional Vraxian techniques. This built fundamental skills of control and awareness. Then they gradually introduced human concepts of adaptability and unconventional tactics. The key was teaching students when to use which approach, how to read a situation and choose the appropriate response. But not everyone at the academy was pleased. Instructor Varnash was a traditionalist. He was a master of cavalry and combat arts. These emphasized honor and formal structure even more rigidly than Vraxian techniques. He was an imposing figure, a reptile-like being with scales that shimmered like copper. His eyes seemed to burn with constant intensity. He had been teaching at the academy for over 70 years. He commanded enormous respect among conservative faculty members. Emma first encountered his opposition during a faculty meeting. The meeting was held in a circular conference room with seating arranged around a central holographic display. Emma attended as the newest member of the instructional staff. She still felt uncomfortable with her elevated status. The agenda included review of the proposed new curriculum. As Kael'Zeth presented their program, explaining how it would supplement rather than replace traditional methods, Emma noticed Varnash growing agitated. His tail lashed back and forth. Emma had learned this showed Cavalrian displeasure. When Kael'Zeth finished, Varnash immediately requested to speak. His voice was deep and harsh, carrying barely controlled anger. He argued that what they proposed was not evolution, but degradation. Encouraging students to abandon honor and fight without rules would create warriors who were little better than savage predators. The galaxy had spent thousands of years developing codes of conduct. These allowed conflicts to be resolved with minimal loss of life and dignity. Human methods threatened to undo all that progress. Several other instructors nodded in agreement. Emma felt her face grow hot. She wanted to respond immediately, to defend the philosophy she and Kael'Zeth had worked so hard to develop. But Kael'Zeth caught her eye and made a subtle gesture. Emma had learned it meant patience. The academy director asked for other perspectives. Several instructors spoke in favor of the new program. They cited Emma's victory over Dexthor and the enthusiasm from students. But the opposition was substantial. It became clear that implementing the new curriculum would not be straightforward. Finally, the director suggested a compromise. The new adaptive combat philosophy would be offered as optional supplementary training, rather than being integrated into core curriculum. Students could choose to participate if they wished, but it would not be mandatory. Traditional instruction would continue unchanged for those who preferred it. Kael'Zeth accepted this decision with his customary grace. He thanked the director for allowing the program to proceed. Emma tried to mirror his composure, but she felt frustrated. They had developed something revolutionary. Now it was being made optional because some instructors were too rigid. After the meeting, Varnash approached Emma directly. His copper scales shimmered with suppressed emotion. His burning eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. He told her he understood she meant well, but she was too young and inexperienced to comprehend what she was doing. Humanity had only recently joined the galactic community. Humans did not yet understand the traditions and values that held civilized space together. By encouraging warriors to fight without honor, she was teaching them to become monsters. Emma felt anger rising but forced herself to remain calm. She replied that she was not teaching anyone to fight without honor. She was teaching them to survive. Honor means nothing to a dead warrior. Sometimes the most honorable choice is doing whatever it takes to protect those who depend on you. Varnash's response was sharp and dismissive. He said such philosophy might be acceptable on a primitive world where might makes right. But the galaxy operated under more civilized principles. Perhaps the Galactic Defense Council made a mistake allowing humans into the Academy before they fully adapted to galactic norms. Before Emma could respond, Kaelseth intervened. His voice was soft but carried unmistakable authority. He pointed out that humanity had survived and thrived in one of the most violent regions of the galaxy, without external support or guidance. Perhaps there was wisdom in their approach that more established species had forgotten. Species that spent so long in relative peace that they lost touch with fundamental realities of survival. Varnash turned his burning gaze on Kaelseth, clearly surprised. He asked if Kaelseth truly believed abandoning 10,000 years of Vraxian martial philosophy in favor of human barbarism was progress. Kaelseth's reply was measured. He explained he was not abandoning Vraxian philosophy, but expanding it. True mastery required understanding multiple approaches, having wisdom to apply them appropriately. A warrior who only knows one way to fight is not a master, merely a specialist limited by their own inflexibility. The argument might have continued, but the director intervened. She suggested such discussions were better suited for the arena than the corridor. Varnash agreed, his tail lashing with barely contained aggression. He challenged Kaelseth to a formal demonstration match. They should let their fighting speak for their philosophies. Kaelseth declined politely. He noted that he and Varnash had sparred many times over the years. They knew each other's styles too well for such a match to prove anything. Instead, he suggested an alternative. Since the debate was really about teaching methods, perhaps their students should demonstrate. He proposed that Emma face one of Varnash's senior students in an exhibition match. Similar to her bout with Dexthor, the match would showcase both traditional Kavalian techniques and Emma's adaptive approach. It would allow the Academy community to judge for themselves. Emma's stomach dropped. She had barely recovered from her match with Dexthor. Now Kaelseth was volunteering her for another high-profile demonstration, but she understood his reasoning. They needed to prove their methods worked consistently, not just once. Varnash accepted immediately. A predatory smile crossed his reptilian features. He said his best student, Talrix, would be honored to demonstrate proper Kavalian combat technique. He added with obvious satisfaction that Talrix had been training under his guidance for 12 years. He had never been defeated in Academy competition. The exhibition match was scheduled for 2 weeks later. This gave Emma time to prepare and allowed word to spread throughout the Academy. The announcement created immediate buzz. Students and faculty chose sides in what was becoming more than just a demonstration match. It was a referendum on whether humanity's approach to combat had real value or was just an interesting novelty. Emma threw herself into preparation with renewed intensity. Kaelseth helped her research Kavalian combat styles. They studied footage of Talrix's previous matches and identified characteristics of his fighting method. Kavalian martial arts emphasized defensive technique and counterattacks. Practitioners were taught to weather their opponent's assault with near-perfect defense. They exhausted opponents through patience, then struck at the precise moment when opponents were most vulnerable. It was elegant and effective, particularly against aggressive fighters who overcommitted to attacks. Talrix embodied this approach perfectly. His record showed match after match where he absorbed everything opponents could throw at him. Then he ended fights with single decisive counters. He was patient, technically flawless, and had never made a significant mistake in competition. Emma discussed strategy with Kaelseth over long training sessions. The problem was obvious. If she fought aggressively, Talrix's defensive style was designed to punish exactly that. But if she fought conservatively, waiting for him to attack, the match would become a stalemate. That favored his superior patience and technical skill. They needed a different approach entirely. Something that would force Talrix out of his comfortable defensive stance without playing into his counterattacking strategy. Emma had an idea based on a concept from human military doctrine called area denial. Instead of trying to directly defeat Talrix's defense, what if she made it impossible for him to maintain his preferred fighting style? What if she controlled the environment itself, turned the arena into a space that favored her approach rather than his? Kaleseth listened with growing interest. It was unorthodox, possibly controversial, but it aligned perfectly with their philosophy of adaptive combat. The goal was not proving one style was superior in abstract terms. It was demonstrating that a warrior who could adapt their approach to the situation would always have advantage over one, bound by rigid tradition. They spent remaining days developing tactics, specifically designed to disrupt Kvalrian defensive technique. The arena was even more crowded than it had been for the match with Dexthor. Word had spread beyond the academy. Representatives from military organizations across the galaxy requested permission to observe. The tension was thick. A mix of anticipation and controversy charged the atmosphere. Emma entered from the west corridor. Her combat suit felt strange after weeks of training in lighter gear. The suit was a compromise between protection and mobility. Human-designed but incorporating materials from several alien technologies. It was black with subtle blue accents. It bore no insignia except a small United Earth Coalition patch on her shoulder. Talrix emerged from the opposite side. Emma got her first good look at her opponent. The Kvalrian warrior was tall and powerfully built. His copper scales were polished to a brilliant shine. He wore traditional Kvalrian armor, ceremonial but fully functional with intricate patterns marking his rank and achievements. Two curved blades hung at his sides. Their edges caught the light. His eyes burned with characteristic Kvalrian intensity. They fixed on Emma with what looked like contempt. The referee called them to the center. The rules were explained. Standard match protocols with one exception. At Emma's request, approved by the Academy Director over Varnash's objections, the arena's adaptive floor would be active throughout the match. Environmental changes would happen at random intervals. Varnash had argued this gave Emma unfair advantage, that it disrupted the formal nature of honorable combat. The director ruled that since the match was meant to demonstrate different combat philosophies, it was appropriate to include environmental factors present in real combat. Besides, both fighters would face the same conditions. Talrix did not show any reaction. Emma suspected he was confident enough that he did not consider environmental factors significant. That confidence, she hoped, would be his weakness. The referee signaled the start. Emma immediately began moving. Not attacking, just circling. She maintained distance while studying Talrix's stance and positioning. The Kvalrian warrior stood perfectly still, his body arranged in textbook defensive posture. He was waiting, patient as stone, for Emma to make the first move. Emma expected this. Kvalrian philosophy taught that the warrior who attacks first reveals their intentions, creates opportunities for counterattack. Talrix would happily stand there all day waiting for her to commit to an assault he could punish. So Emma did not attack. She continued circling, occasionally feinting as if she might close distance but always pulling back before committing. She was watching the floor beneath them, waiting for the first environmental change. Almost a minute had passed. Talrix's tail began to lash with irritation. Emma's refusal to engage was forcing him out of his comfortable defensive stance.
He took a step forward, then another.
His patience showed cracks. If Emma would not attack, he would have to force the engagement. That was when the floor changed. The polished stone surface suddenly shifted to uneven terrain, simulating a rocky battlefield with irregular footing. Talrix stumbled slightly, his perfect stance compromised by unexpected change. Emma had been ready for it. Her weight already distributed to adapt quickly. She attacked during that moment of adjustment. Not with committed assault, but with quick probing strikes designed to keep Talrix off balance. The Kvalrian warrior recovered quickly. His training asserted itself. But he was no longer in his ideal defensive posture. He was reacting, adapting, fighting on terms he had not chosen. Emma pressed her advantage but remained cautious. She learned from Kaleseth that overwhelming aggression against a defensive specialist was exactly what they wanted. Instead, she maintained pressure while staying mobile. Never committing fully to any single attack, she used the uneven terrain to her advantage. Her smaller size and lower center of gravity made her more stable on irregular surface. Talrix adapted his strategy. He abandoned pure defensive stance for a more balanced approach. He began launching his own attacks, testing Emma's defenses with quick strikes from his dual blades. His technique was flawless, each movement economical and precise. But Emma noticed something. He was fighting the way he had been trained, following forms and patterns of Kvalrian martial arts even on terrain not suited to such rigid technique. The environment changed again. The rocky terrain smoothed out, but lighting dimmed dramatically, simulating night combat conditions. Emergency lighting strips along the floor provided minimal illumination, cast strange shadows across the platform. Emma had trained for exactly this scenario. She immediately adjusted her fighting style, relying more on sound and movement rather than visual cues. Kelseth had drilled her on blind fighting techniques, teaching her to sense opponents' position through air pressure changes and subtle sounds of movement. Talric struggled more noticeably. Falrian combat relied heavily on precise visual assessment of distance and timing. In dim lighting, his attacks lost some precision. He was still dangerous. His training allowed reasonable compensation, but Emma saw frustration building in his movements. She used poor visibility to execute techniques that would have been too obvious in good lighting. She threw loose debris from earlier rocky terrain. Objects created distractions, forced Talrix to defend against threats from unexpected angles. She used feints and misdirection, exploiting the fact that in low light movement could be misread. The crowd was completely silent. Everyone strained to follow shadowy combat on the platform. Emma scored 2 solid hits against Talrix's armor, both targeting joints where defensive technique could not fully protect. Neither blow would have been fatal in real combat, but they demonstrated she could penetrate his defense. Talrix responded with increased aggression. Abandoning his defensive philosophy entirely for overwhelming offense, his blades flashed through dim lighting, forcing Emma into full defensive mode. For the first time in the match, she was genuinely in danger. Talrix might have been struggling with environmental conditions, but his fundamental skill was extraordinary. The lighting suddenly returned to normal. The environmental system shifted again, but this time, instead of terrain or visibility changing, the arena floor began to tilt slightly, creating an inclined surface that constantly shifted angle. It was subtle but disorienting, required constant adjustment to maintain balance. Emma had requested this particular environmental hazard specifically. She trained on variable gravity and tilting surfaces during military service, preparation for fighting on ships during combat maneuvers. It was uniquely human concern, born from species that fought wars in space before developing artificial gravity technology. Talrix had no such training. Kvalrian culture developed artificial gravity so early that fighting on unstable surfaces was not part of their martial tradition. He stumbled as floor tilted, his perfect footwork compromised by constant need to adjust balance. Emma pressed advantage ruthlessly. She was not trying to overpower Talrix. She was simply making it impossible for him to fight the way he had been trained. Every time he tried establishing defensive stance, she forced him to move. Every time he adapted to current tilt, it shifted again, requiring new adjustment. The match had become less about fighting skill and more about adaptability. Talrix was technically superior to Emma in almost every measurable way. His form was better, his techniques more refined, his experience more extensive. But none of that mattered when he could not maintain conditions his fighting style required. From the observation area, Emma caught a glimpse of Varnash. The Kvalrian instructor's tail lashed violently. His copper scales seemed to darken with fury. He understood what was happening. His prize student was being defeated not through superior fighting ability, but through environmental manipulation and adaptive tactics. Talrix made a desperate lunge, abandoning technique entirely for powerful but overcommitted attack. Emma saw it coming. The same desperate aggression she had used against Kalezeth months ago. She responded the way Kalezeth taught her, flowing around the attack, using Talrix's own momentum against him. Her blade found the gap between his armor plates at the shoulder joint. A killing blow stopped just short of contact. The referee immediately called the match. Signaling Emma's victory, the arena erupted in noise, but it was not unified roar of approval. The crowd was divided, some cheering, others voicing clear disapproval. Emma could hear arguments breaking out in several languages. Debates about whether what they witnessed was legitimate combat or cheap trick. Talrix stood frozen, his breathing heavy, staring at Emma with mixture of disbelief and rage. He had been defeated. Worse, he had been made to look clumsy and unprepared. For a warrior as proud as him, trained in one of the galaxy's most respected martial traditions, the loss was devastating. Before Emma could extend traditional gesture of respect, Varnash stormed onto the platform. His voice was loud enough to be heard throughout arena, bypassing the referee's attempts to restore order. He declared this match proved nothing except that humans were willing to abandon all principles of honorable combat to gain victory. Manipulating environment was not fighting, it was cheating. In a real match on neutral ground with standard conditions, Talrix would have easily defeated Emma. Everyone knew it. Emma felt anger rising. But before she could respond, a voice cut through chaos. It was Dexthor, the Kresh warrior she defeated in... Later that evening, Emma found herself in Kael'Zeth's private office once again. The Vraxian instructor was reviewing footage from the match. His four hands moved in contemplative gestures as he analyzed every exchange. He told Emma she had fought well. She demonstrated exactly the principles they had been developing, but he also pointed out she had created powerful enemies in the process. Varnash was influential among conservative instructors. He would not forget this defeat easily. Emma asked if Kael'Zeth thought she made a mistake. If she should have found a way to win, that was less controversial. The Vraxian instructor was quiet for a long moment before responding. He said progress always creates resistance. Changing established systems requires challenging people's fundamental assumptions. What Emma did was not wrong, but it was disruptive. Disruption always brings consequences. He explained the real test would be whether their new program produced better warriors, whether cadets trained in adaptive combat philosophy actually survived and thrived in real combat situations, better than those trained purely in traditional methods. Time would tell if they had genuinely improved galactic military training, or merely introduced controversy without substance. Emma considered this soberly. She had been so focused on proving her methods worked that she had not fully considered long-term implications. They were now responsible for shaping how an entire generation of galactic warriors would be trained. If they were wrong, if their philosophy failed in real combat, the consequences would be measured in lives lost. Kael'Zeth seemed to sense her concern. He reminded her that doubt was healthy. The warrior who never questions their methods eventually becomes rigid and brittle. The key was to maintain the same adaptive mindset in their teaching that they promoted in their combat philosophy, always willing to adjust based on new information and real-world results. Over the following months, Emma's life settled into a new routine. She continued her own training while taking on increasing teaching responsibilities. The adaptive combat program grew rapidly. Cadets from dozens of species signed up to learn these hybrid techniques. Emma discovered she enjoyed teaching more than expected. Each species brought different physical capabilities and mental approaches to combat. Adapting the curriculum to work for such diverse students required constant creativity and problem-solving. It was challenging in ways purely physical training never was. She also formed friendships with other instructors, including some who had initially been skeptical of her methods. Dexthor became a frequent training partner. They developed mutual respect based on shared experience of having faced each other in serious combat. The Kresh warrior admitted that losing to Emma had been the best thing that could have happened. It forced him to recognize limitations in his own approach. Word of the program spread beyond the academy. Emma received communications from military officers across the galaxy. Some requested that she travel to their systems to provide specialized training. The Galactic Defense Council formally recognized the adaptive combat philosophy as a significant contribution to military science. They awarded Emma a commendation for her work. Commander Holland sent a message from Earth. He informed her that the United Earth Coalition was immensely proud of what she accomplished. She had done more for humanity's reputation in 6 months than decades of diplomacy accomplished. She had shown the galaxy that humans were not just another minor species trying to find their place. They were people with unique perspectives and valuable contributions to offer. But Holland warned this would also bring new challenges. Not everyone in the galaxy was happy about humanity's rapid integration into galactic society. Some species saw humans as dangerous, unpredictable, too violent for civilized space. Emma's success would make those concerns more vocal. But Emma never forgot Varnash's words. His accusation that human methods were barbaric and dangerous. She knew there was some truth in his concerns. The galaxy had spent millennia developing rules and traditions that limited the destructiveness of warfare, that allowed conflicts to be resolved with minimal casualties. By teaching warriors to fight without those constraints, was she making future conflicts more brutal? She discussed these concerns with Kael'Zeth during their regular evening conversations. The Vraxian instructor acknowledged the moral complexity of what they were doing. He pointed out that weapons and techniques were neither good nor evil in themselves. What mattered was the wisdom and character of those who wielded them. Their goal, he suggested, should not be creating more efficient killers. It should be creating warriors who understood when and how to apply force appropriately. The adaptive combat philosophy included not just tactical techniques, but also ethical frameworks for deciding when different approaches were justified. Emma incorporated this perspective into her teaching. She made sure every technical lesson was accompanied by discussion of moral implications. The responsibility that came with capability. She taught her students that the most important adaptation was knowing when not to fight, when to seek alternatives to violence even when violence would be easier or more effective. 1 year after Emma first broke her practice blade in front of Kaleseth, the Academy held a formal ceremony. It recognized the most significant contributions to military science. Emma was awarded the Galactic Combat Innovation Medal, the first human to receive such recognition. Kaleseth received a similar honor for his role in developing the adaptive combat philosophy. As Emma stood on the stage looking out at assembled representatives from across the galaxy, she thought about how far she had come. She arrived at the Academy as an unknown human trying to prove her worth. Now she was helping shape the future of galactic military training, but more importantly, she had become a bridge between humanity and the wider galaxy. She had shown that human perspectives shaped by Earth's violent history were not barbaric relics to be overcome. They were valuable insights that could complement and enhance the wisdom of older civilizations. In her acceptance speech, Emma talked about her first day at the Academy, about having her sword broken by someone she thought was invincible. She explained how that moment taught her that strength without adaptability was brittle. The most powerful warriors were those who could change their approach when circumstances demanded it. She also talked about the responsibility that came with teaching others to fight effectively. She emphasized their goal was not creating more efficient warfare, it was creating warriors prepared for any situation, who had skills to survive and protect others, who had wisdom to know when fighting was truly necessary. She concluded by acknowledging that humanity was still learning its place in galactic society, still figuring out how to balance its own perspectives with thousands of years of alien wisdom, but she expressed confidence this process of mutual learning would make the entire galaxy stronger, more adaptable, better prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring. After the ceremony, Emma found a quiet corner of the Academy. She looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, the blue world that created a species capable of adapting to any challenge through determination and innovation. She thought about all the humans who would follow in her footsteps, who would attend the Academy and learn from the program she and Kaleseth created. They would face their own challenges, their own moments of doubt and triumph, but they would do so knowing humanity had already proven its worth, that human methods and perspectives had value the galaxy recognized and respected. Emma smiled, remembering her broken practice blade. That weapon had been a symbol of her limitations but also of her potential. It had been destroyed by overwhelming force. But in breaking, it revealed a truth that would change how the galaxy thought about combat itself. Sometimes things need to break before they can be rebuilt stronger. The blade had broken. Traditional assumptions about combat had been challenged. Rigid certainties had given way to adaptive philosophies. All of these breaks had been necessary for growth, for evolution, for progress. Kaleseth found her there, his presence announced by the soft sound of his footsteps. He stood beside her in comfortable silence, both of them looking out at the stars. Finally he spoke, his voice carrying the same soft authority it always had. He told her that when she first arrived at the Academy, he saw her as an interesting challenge, a student who might help him understand human combat methods. He admitted he had not expected to learn as much from her as she learned from him. He had not anticipated how much her perspective would change his own understanding of combat. He said true mastery was not about perfecting a single style. It was about understanding the principles that made all styles effective. Emma had taught him that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from unexpected sources, from species that approach problems differently because they face different challenges. Emma thanked him for taking a chance on an unknown human cadet, for being willing to challenge his own assumptions and traditions. She said she hoped future generations would build on what they started, continuing to adapt and evolve as new challenges emerged. Kaleseth agreed. He added this was only the beginning. The adaptive combat philosophy they developed was a framework, not a final answer. Future warriors would refine it. Add to it, possibly even replace it with